What makes you you? Exploring the narrative theory of personal identity. My name is Elizabeth Camp and I teach philosophy at Rutgers University. Today, I'd like to delve into the concept of narrative theories of personal identity. Personal identity is one of the foundational questions in philosophy, essentially pondering who am I and what makes me me. These inquiries are not only intellectually stimulating but also deeply personal as we all grapple with them in our own lives. However, when philosophers tackle these questions, their responses can sometimes seem overly theoretical and disconnected from everyday experiences. They often frame personal identity within broader metaphysical discussions, focusing on the criteria for an entity's continuity or dissolution. To illustrate, consider a thought experiment involving a person named Alpha. Born in El Paso, Alpha works at a pharmaceutical company, enjoys spicy cuisine, and practices kickboxing for leisure. Now, imagine if Alpha's physical form were destroyed, only to be instantly replaced with an exact molecular replica on Mars. Would this new entity still be Alpha? Or would she be merely someone who matches Alpha's description? What if Alpha's memories and desires were swapped with those of the Queen of England? Which individual would truly be Alpha then? Another scenario involves transplanting Alpha's brain hemispheres into two separate bodies. In each case, the prevailing philosophical views that personal identity is synonymous with one's physical body or a continuous series of overlapping psychological states struggle to provide coherent answers. More concerning, these perspectives fail to address the aspects of ourselves that we find significant and meaningful. They emphasize traits that could apply equally to any individual, whether it's Alpha, you, or even a rabbit, without explaining why our distinctions matter. This is where narrative theories of personal identity shine. They propose that we are primarily sense-making beings, as John Niles puts it, tellers rather than knowers. On this view, our identity is defined by the narrative we construct about ourselves, or perhaps more accurately, by the narrative crafted by our most honest and reflective self. Think about the stories we share during first dates, at social gatherings, and in our autobiographies. We discuss our origins, past experiences, and future aspirations. When we ask, who am I, we're essentially seeking to weave these elements into a cohesive, meaningful narrative. Narrative theories explain why certain actions and characteristics feel intrinsic to our identity while others seem incidental. For instance, Alpha's passion for science might be integral to her self-concept, whereas her job at a pharmaceutical company may simply be a means to support herself. Additionally, this perspective underscores the dynamic nature of personal development. As Alpha grows older, her self-description might evolve. She might initially identify as someone from a particular neighborhood but later redefine herself based on new experiences or insights. Being born in a particular place doesn't fundamentally define who we are or what we should do. Instead, it centers on the unique aspects of each individual and their specific roles at various stages of their life journey. The narrative perspective highlights the deep, instinctive link between understanding ourselves and making the best choices for our lives. For Alpha, the most fulfilling path might involve returning to graduate school, launching a nonprofit, or saving for a house. Ultimately, only she can determine what's best, and her choices could lead to vastly different future versions of herself, each with distinct interests and values. Given its comprehensive explanatory power, it's no wonder that the narrative viewpoint has been embraced by numerous philosophers, psychologists, anthropologists, historians, and literary critics. However, this approach faces a significant issue. It primarily addresses the identity and importance of entire lives rather than the essence of individual selves. According to Aristotle, a narrative inherently includes a beginning, middle, and end, with the conclusion being crucial to its overall structure and meaning. When the narrative view defines a self in relation to its encompassing story, it ties the self's value to the story's ultimate outcome. One major drawback is that many lives conclude prematurely or continue beyond their prime, without reaching a satisfying endpoint. Intuitively, we wouldn't argue that these incomplete narratives diminish the worth of the individuals who lived them. Consider Alpha, who might possess a strong, admirable moral character and contribute positively to society, even without a grand, overarching life story. She may have always known she wanted to be a scientist, formed meaningful friendships, pursued interesting hobbies, assisted numerous people, and maintained inner peace throughout her life, qualities that significantly enrich her character, though they may not align neatly with a structured narrative arc. While the concept of a self-made individual striving to uncover and embody their true self is inspiring and prevalent in Western culture, it shouldn't be the sole benchmark for assessing personhood universally. In light of these challenges, it's logical to explore whether another framework could better explain the significance and development of specific selves in a manner that traditional philosophical views on personal identity fail to address. A different literary device comes to mind, viewing the self as a character. Similar to the narrative view, this perspective posits that when we form our identities and perceive others, we aim for more than a collection of traits. We strive to integrate behaviors, habits, commitments, and memories into a cohesive whole, a unified tapestry of existence. As Iris Murdoch notes, crafting this coherence of character can be a profound, enduring endeavor, often described as a remarkable art form. Storytelling is a frequent method we use to achieve this unity, but these narratives usually focus on brief segments of our lives rather than our complete existence. Additionally, some individuals are fortunate or unfortunate enough to possess a coherent sense of self from the outset or to develop it gradually without much introspection. Stories can be helpful in this process, but they are not essential for establishing a sense of self. The reliance on stories or characters might lead us to question whether the selves we construct through interaction are genuinely real. What if we are merely collections of properties that differ from one another in countless trivial ways, lacking the profound patterns that supposedly make selfhood meaningful? What if this construction is, in some sense, a fiction? I believe this perspective is accurate. The reason standard views of personal identity fail to explain what makes one person distinct from another is that there is no fundamental metaphysical difference between individuals. Apart from being numerically distinct and possessing numerous different properties, many of which are insignificant. However, this is not how we actually live our lives. As creatures that strive to make sense of the world, we are compelled to make important decisions, form deep connections with others, and pursue long-term goals. These endeavors require us to determine what we truly care about, even if it holds no significance for the universe as a whole. When examined from an objective, external perspective, our choices and attachments may seem inconsequential, but they are essential to our existence and sense of purpose. By acknowledging and embracing our capacity for self-reflection and decision-making, we can cultivate a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.